Luke Hollander, pastor over at First English. What prompted this trip today, I'll be talking about Costa Rica, is a little over 10 years ago I went down to a resort with my family in Costa Rica. It was the first time I had done any real international travel. We kind of stayed on the resort. It was right after my dad's deployment, and so it was really a family trip where we were just spending time together. And I would occasionally get to spend some time watching the birds around there, but we don't want that. But I didn't get to spend as much time with the birds as I really wanted to. So I've always wanted to get back to Costa Rica just to go see the birds. All right, this looks promising.
All them down.
Sure. Done. There we go. Hey. So I've wanted to go to Costa Rica just to see birds for a long time. And I have a friend whose mom owns a property down there. Oh no, don't do that. Okay. Whew. Teasing me.
Those ones won't come back in.
I had a mom who, my friend's mom has had a place down there, and so he's been asking me for years to go down with him, a guy in Rochester I've birded with for years. And this year I said, okay, I can make it work. I can take about a week off and we can go down. So the two of us were going to do this trip, and we ended up inviting last minute a buddy from Grand Marais, Minnesota. So there were 3 of us in total. We flew down to San Jose, which is kind of the main center of Costa Rica. And my buddies and I decided to make this trip as cheap as possible. So we had about a 22-hour flight between layovers and everything, and arrived in San Jose at 2 a.m. Figured out customs, which was a pain. Got to our rental car, which was supposed to be a cute little, well, I drive a RAV4 here in town sometimes, and they upgraded us to this massive Ford Eclipse. And this picture doesn't do it justice, but this is bigger than the Ford Escalade. I mean, this thing is just massive. And if you've ever heard about traveling in Costa Rica, if you've ever traveled in Costa Rica, bigger is not better. Their roads are small. You're driving up basically mountain 4x4 roads a lot of times. Lots of potholes, and in that way it was nice. But a lot of our driving was in very remote areas, and we were constantly praying that traffic wouldn't come towards us because there wasn't a whole lot of room. So we got there at about 2, and we had to get to Carrara National Park by about 4:30, where we were going to meet our first guide. Keep in mind, we haven't slept in over 24 hours. If you haven't figured out yet, we are kind of crazy. We really like watching the birds. That was our whole focus of this trip. Day 1 was going to be low-key, but we invited this third guy, and he's like, we are maximizing our time. I'm paying for a guide on day 1. So he got us this guide who is going to show us in this region, which we were just going to be in for the morning, which is why he really wanted to maximize that time. So we get on, deal with all the tolls. There's lots of stories about the first couple hours of the trip, but I won't bore you with that. We're here to talk about the birds. So we get to the first stop, which is this Cerro Lodge Road. I'm just telling you about these roads that we were on. This isn't in the mountains, but this is about the quality of the road. So we get off the main path, and there's this little entrance area. And there's a rope across the entrance to the road, and a little building, which is open but tiny. It's kind of like a garden shed with a little window in it. And it's 4 a.m. One of my buddies is very sick. He's vomiting on the side of the road. The other buddy is just a pain in my butt. And I won't talk about him that much, but I love him dearly. So we get to this spot. I'm like, I'm not sure this is where we're really meeting this guy. There's no parking. There's a rope blocking the road, but I'm pretty sure, based on our GPS, this is the right spot. So I pull over, and after about 5 minutes, out pops this guy from Costa Rica in this little garden shed. He was sleeping in there, and I guess it was his job to kind of manage the entrance. Doesn't speak a lick of English. I studied Spanish 15 years ago, so obviously I've got it figured out. I'm the interpreter. So I managed to communicate with this guy, and he helps us out with the guy who's sick. He needed a washcloth and needed a lighter because he needed to smoke. That was why he was sick. And then about 2 minutes into this interaction, we realized we got a flat tire on this giant vehicle. And we're meeting our guide in about 20 minutes, who's going to ride with us. So here we go. I've changed tires before. No big deal. It's a big vehicle. Maybe a little harder. I don't know. Well, it requires this really specific little tool to change the tire. And so I peel this truck apart, and I end up finding it. And we end up releasing the tire, which is secured underneath, and we get it released. It drops all the way down. Get the tire changed, throw the spare in, and the guide shows up right as we're kind of finishing that. While all this is happening, we did hear some rustling in the leaves, and we did get to see a sloth, which was pretty cool. My buddy said, "Hey, get a good picture of it." I said, "Oh, we'll see plenty of sloths. I'm not going to worry about it." That was the only sloth we saw, so that's the best picture we got. So here we are. Tires.
An action photo?
That's an action photo. This you can see the streaking from how fast it was flying down.
Kind of like you.
So it's 4:30. Tires changed. Buddy's starting to feel a little better, and so our guide starts playing tape for owl. We've got about 30 to 45 minutes before the sun comes up, and we were hoping to see or hear a few owls on this trip. And the guy pulls up on the road, says, "I've got this tree where they used to roost, but I haven't seen them in a couple weeks." Well, he starts playing this tape. He's playing the tape, playing the tape, playing the tape, nothing. And then finally, we hear this really distant kind of tooting. That's kind of the noise they make. And I'm like, oh, there it is. We hear it. And he's like, "Well, do you want to see it?" I'm like, "Sure." So he just walks over about 10 feet, puts a light up in the tree, and it's right there. And I mean, it sounded like it was 3/4 of a mile away. It was just so quiet. This isn't something we like to do too much, is spotlight owls. It's not my favorite practice because it can disturb their roosting habits. But apparently these guides do it almost every night, and the owls keep coming back, which is a pretty good indicator that it's not really negatively impacting them. But we said, okay, if you're going to spotlight it just for a minute, we'll grab a quick shot and be done. So any of our nocturnal shots happened within about a minute because we didn't want to disturb the birds so much. So this was our first owl, Pacific screech owl, and we ended up hearing a bunch of ferruginous pygmy owls, which are just a tiny little owl. And he said, "Don't worry, we'll probably get a chance to see one in the day." So first thing in the morning, we're kind of looking for this owl, which we've probably heard 4 or 5 of them. And finally, we get one in the scope, which is about, this is about 150 yards away up in the top of a tree. So the fact that I was able to capture a picture of it at all, I was kind of happy with. But just a cute little owl. So we started the trip, 2 owls. My buddy all of a sudden isn't worrying about being sick so much because we're here to see the birds, and we're starting to see the birds. So day 1, you're in for a wild ride. That was just the start. Day 1 is kind of our most eventful day. We're starting on this Cerro Lodge Road, which is a resort for basically birding because it's in such good habitat. It's right along the Caribbean side of the ocean, very humid, hot, They have good rainforest. It's low elevation. So it's going to be way different habitat than when where we're spending the rest of our time, which is why we wanted to spend a little time in this area. The national park doesn't open till 7, and we've got a couple hours of light before that. So we're birding this road, which is along this lodge called Cerro Lodge. In the future, I'd love to stay there sometime. It looks like a pretty cool spot. But we're just literally birding this road that I showed you pictures of back here. We're just kind of walking along the road, and you'll notice there's some open pasture on one side and thick forest on the other. And birds really like edge. So this is where we're going to see our biggest concentration of stuff. I'll pause for a second and say I'm not going to go through all the birds. I'll give you kind of a snapshot of what we saw. But as two of us kept records of what we saw. And between the two of us, we saw just over 300 species of birds in 6 days. And just over 225 of them were brand new species to me, which was very exciting. And over 250 were new for my buddy. So it was a fast and furious trip. We spent little time doing anything but birding. When I take you to the place where we're staying for most of the time, it was just this lovely family who converted their little sustainable farm into a resort of sorts. They put up a few cabins, and they love hospitality. They cook their own meals, really friendly family. And every day they messaged me and said, okay, when are you going to be here for dinner? Or what time can we have breakfast ready for you? I said, well, unless you're planning on making breakfast by 4 a.m., don't worry about us, because we'll be gone by then, and we won't be back till after dark. And every day they kept saying, okay, let us know. And we did get to chat with them one evening, but we were birding every hour of the day. So trogons are just a really cool family of birds that we don't get up here in Minnesota, and two of the first birds we saw, these two were together, and you'll notice they look very similar, but these are in fact different species of trogon. Not very good pictures. Most of the pictures here will be mine, so they won't be that good. But you can notice this one doesn't have a tail, and we had slaty-tailed and black-headed trogon, which was pretty exciting. This one's got a cool catkin in its mouth. That's not its bill, but it's eating something. Yeah, but one has a blue eye ring and the other a white. And then if it had its tail, you would notice the tails look different. But our goal was to see 4 or 5 species of trogons, and we did that, which was great. We have a couple kingbirds here in Minnesota, but they have so many kingbirds and flycatchers that have this yellowy and black and white appearance that it's you learn their calls, and that's how you distinguish them really quickly. So within the first day, we had figured out all the calls of the common flycatchers, which is how we can get good at birding. Me and a buddy are doing all this research ahead of time, practicing the calls, looking at the birds. But we had tropical kingbirds and social flycatchers. They have great kiskadees and other varieties of these beautiful yellow flycatchers. So we had 2 different ones at the beginning there. And then they had lots of different species of doves and pigeons. And we'll get to look at some of them through the time, but these are ruddy ground doves, which you can see in the southern U.S. But you can notice kind of pretty red, and they almost have a bluish cap to them, which is kind of fun. They have just so many raptors down there. It's so fun. And I'm sorry I didn't get any pictures of some of the others, but this is a yellow-headed caracara, which was on the top of our list, and we were really excited to see it. A lot of raptors, just like and even here, sometimes you see them soaring far away, but you don't get a really good look at them. So we were excited to see this while we were driving, and we pulled over and got some shots of it. But it's a yellow-headed caracara.
How big a bird is that?
It's pretty good size. Yeah. Yeah, some of them turned out pretty good. I'm really waiting for my buddy's pictures because he went to photography school and has his camera probably costs 5 times the price of mine. And he just bought a new computer simply to process his photos from Costa Rica, and he hasn't sent them to me yet. So I'm really eager to get his photos. One of the things we were most excited about, you noticed on the first page, was a scarlet macaw, which is just a bird of TV. To me, it's like, this isn't a real wild bird. But we went here hoping to see them, and we in fact did get to see lots of them. They weren't very photogenic. They had no interest in being near us. This one landed in a tree near us for about 5 to 10 seconds. And it was so backlit, I had a really hard time getting photos. And my camera does a really poor job of flight shots. So the fact that I got anything with it taking off, and you can see just how long that tail is. It's got greens and reds and blues, and just a gorgeous bird. And they're big, you know. These are, with the tail, you know, they're long. So it was a real treat to get to see these scarlet macaws. Apparently they have a roost in the Carrara area of about 100 to 120 birds. And they move back and forth from where they feed along the ocean to the national park where they roost at night. So finally at 7 a.m. the national park opened. This Carrara National Park. The road we were on was just a mile away up here and kind of traveled down along this. So we go down here, and right where it crosses the river is a really famous bridge. They call it Crocodile Bridge. And apparently naturalists had been feeding chickens to crocodiles there for years and years. And it became illegal in the country. If you don't know a lot about Costa Rica, from what I know, they're one of the best ecotourism countries in the world, in that they're not doing it just to take advantage of tourists, but they're doing it to try to protect and take care of their natural resources. And so they have really good laws in place to take care of their animals. They don't allow baiting, like feeding crocodiles anymore. A lot of the preserves are protected and have pretty high entrance fees. We were paying almost $25 a person anytime we went into, whether it was a little park or a big national park. And all that money was to preserve these rainforests. And if you're really interested in Costa Rica history, I invite you to read about it sometime. But they had a bunch of Quakers from the U.S. move down there and bring dairy cattle with them. And that was what started some of the deforestation down there, which was really interesting. We crossed Crocodile Bridge, saw a couple crocodiles, had a quick bite to eat. In the parking lot, there's this guy who's taking tips to watch your car. It all makes you nervous. So we keep on keeping on, get to the main site where we walk a little loop looking for a couple particular species, and then we travel back up and do this stretch along the river where we spend the next few hours. And I'll just show some highlights from this morning. All sorts of different families of birds that we just don't have here in the U.S. This is a white-whiskered puffbird. Just a few inches, maybe 4 or 5 inches, but just a really cute little guy, and you can even see kind of some of the white whiskers coming through in the photo. I was pretty excited to see that one. Again, lots of variety. I've got lots of really bad photos that were to help me ID stuff. This is another type of flycatcher. We've got a streaked flycatcher. Any of you know brown creepers? The little cute little birds that you can barely see unless they're moving, and they climb up and down trees. Well, they've got about 20 species of creepers. They're tree creepers. And none of them are quite as small as ours. Some are similar, but they get as big as like this. And so this was going to be one of the real ID challenges for us, was figuring out some of these creepers, because we knew we'd probably see 10 species of them. And we'd get views like this, that's not a very good view of a bird. And so with very little information, we're trying to do our best to ID them. This one happens to be a wedge-billed. And just you can tell by this where some of the spotting is and the bill shape. But it was great fun to try to discern what these birds were. We saw lots of tanagers. They were hard to get pictures of. This one is a white-shouldered tanager. And on our last day, we actually were at a fruit feeding station where we saw lots of species of tanagers, and I got some better photos. So we'll conclude the trip with a little bit more on tanagers. This is one I was really, really excited to see. In the bird book, it almost looked like a giant hummingbird, right? That big, long bill. But really, they are more closely related to the kingfisher. And I didn't know because we have our kingfishers here in the U.S. almost exclusively feed on water, right? They're looking for fish. But there are a lot of species of kingfisher that spend their time exclusively in the forest. And this would be kind of one of those kingfisher-adjacent birds and hunts insects. And so rufous-tailed jacamar, I was really excited to see that. We've got a male on the left and a female on the right. When you go birding with people that are intense about birding, they always talk about what was your best pull? What was the best bird you kind of discovered on your own? What was your best pull, is what they say. And this was probably mine from the first day. This was a ruddy quail dove. It's a dove, but it has some more features like a quail would. It doesn't really fly all that often. It's on the ground. It forages similar to a quail. And they've got about 4 or 5 species of quail dove. So this was one we weren't expecting to see, but I had heard a little rustling in the woods, and everybody had gone about 50 yards ahead of me, and I kind of whistled at them. I said, I think I got something. And they turned around and were pretty excited. But you can see kind of a funky looking face on that thing. That nose really dipped down. So, ruddy quail dove. Another example of just some of the diversity. In the top left, you can see that's kind of like our pileated woodpecker. And it's not the ivory-billed woodpecker, which is extinct, but instead the pale-billed. So very similar, a big woodpecker, nests in the big hollow cavities of trees. Prehistoric-looking thing, We heard pigeons, they have pigeons all over like we do, except for they're actually wild, and they have a lot of different species, and they're forest dwellers. And so we would hear them often, but see them rarely. So we were excited to see this red-billed pigeon. Here's another of those wood creepers I was explaining to you about. This one has a way cooler name, though. Plain xenops. Just kind of funky-looking bill, too. And then these motmets were really a target for us. We saw, I think, 4 or 5 species of motmet. And I'll show you a better picture in a little bit, but just brilliant colors and a really funky looking tail. So I'll show you that in a future photo here. I don't know why, but my buddy was really hoping to see a laughing falcon. They've got about 4 species of forest falcons, and they're loud. You can hear them from a mile away, but you rarely see them. And so this was another really exciting one for us, and it was another one where my buddies were about 50 yards ahead of me, and I said, I got another one for you. So they all came back, and we got to see this pretty, you can see, really funky looking falcon. But they make kind of a ha 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 ha, hence the name. And then this was the bird. The next one I'm going to show you was really the bird we went to this region for. When we got our bird books, the front of the Costa Rica bird book is this next bird, and we talked to our guide and said, this is really our main target. If we can see this bird, we'll be happy. And he said, well, I'm really sorry to tell you, but it's been about 5 or 6 weeks since this bird has been in the area. So don't have your hopes up. And we were on our way out. We had maybe 200 yards left of the trail, and we were going to be done. And 5 of them flew in. And so we were just absolutely tickled. And this will be the first species of toucan that I show you. This is a fiery-billed aracari. Again, this is over 100 yards away, up in the height of a tree, backlit, and I was just thrilled to get a photo at all. So this is a photo I took, just almost surreal. My mother-in-law is an artist, and she's painting this one for me, so I'm really, really excited about that.
Is the bill as colorful as the body
Yep,
there?
it sure is. It sure is. Yep, just absolutely stunning. The bill's, 6 different shades of orange, yellow, green. Yeah. Yeah.
You can't some paint on it,
Right.
just amazing.
Isn't it just stunning?
How big is that bird?
That bird is probably kind of in this size. Yeah. So not real big, but the bill is as big as its body. Fiery-billed aracari. Has a cool name too, so,
Appropriate.
So that finishes Carrara National Park. I know we're almost halfway in and I'm still on day 1. Us preachers are long-winded.
We're getting that tire fixed and everything.
Yeah. So we have to travel.
Have you slept yet?
No.
You still haven't slept?
Still haven't slept. No. No. We've got to travel from Carrara. It's 1 p.m. We've got to get to Rancho de Lilo. Anytime it says 2 hours, you can plan on about another hour of travel. So we drive. This is the only time we really see the ocean, at least up close. And we were going to stop and spend some time in it and look for ocean birds. But traffic was backed up coming the other way so bad. We had no sleep. My guys weren't helping me with anything. I was doing the traveling, the navigating, everything. So I said, shut up, I'm driving, we're going to where we're sleeping. But, there's one bird I want to look for on the way. One bird. And so we decided to hit some back roads. So we drove through kind of this wasteland, which was a really bad idea. With the exception of we did get to see the bird I was looking for. And that was this thick-billed, it's a thick-billed thickney. And it's just kind of a boring bird for a lot of people, but it was this cool shorebird that hangs out in pastures with cattle. And we were really excited about that. Scissortail flycatcher wasn't a new bird to me, but we saw this. You never know what you're going to see when you're traveling. And they hang out on fence lines and telephone lines, so that was a beautiful bird we got to see. One of these actually showed up in Rochester 2 years ago. So we do get these in Minnesota once a year probably. So we get all the way to Rancho de Lilo. That's what this place kind of looks like. We had a cabin to ourselves, no heating or cooling. It got really hot during the day. Did our best to open up windows and cool it down at night. But that was our little sanctuary. They have this little pool, which I really wanted to get into, but never had a lot of time until the last night. And notice they turn over the water almost every day because they don't put any chemicals in it. So they just turn it over. It was cold and wonderful. I loved it. This is the entrance into, you can see it's just kind of a farm-looking area. But Rancho de Lilo, it's like 2 miles from where we're spending most of the time birding. It's 2 miles and about a mile of elevation change, which we didn't know. And so we were literally driving up and down a mountain to get back and forth from this place. And like I said, most of the time was at night doing our traveling. So that first morning of travel was an adventure. But we made it. The insurance was under my name, so I didn't let anybody else drive. I'm kind of a control freak. So we're still on day 1. We're at Rancho de Lila. We've still got about 45 minutes of light, so we're not done birding yet. And we got to see some more cool things. That morning we heard probably 8 species of parrot and parakeets, but we didn't get to see very many. So it was pretty cool. We got this good look at a white-fronted parrot. Most parrots there have red on the face and red in the wings, but they have subtle differences between size, tail length, and where else color shows up. And you can notice on that one, there's just a small patch of white on the top of the forehead there. Different species of sparrows than we have here, and of course these really cool blue jay looking things with fun little tufts. So we were excited to see these white-throated magpie jays. We saw one in the morning about 300 yards away, so we were excited to see these ones a little closer. And in fact, day 2 when we got up and were driving at night, we could see 12 of them on the telephone wire. Just with the night light, we could see them. So that was pretty fun. All right, day 2. That was 30 minutes. We got 6 days, so everybody's got about 3 hours, right? Now, some of the days we got busy birding, and my photography became less and less. So my buddy who wanted to do this trip really wanted us to go to Monte Verde, and the Stella's Bakery is his mom's favorite place to eat. And apparently they feed the birds, and we saw these pictures and had all these expectations of sitting down to these delicious meals and watching dozens of species of colorful birds come into their fruit feeders. It was really disappointing. The owners were gone that week, and they weren't feeding the birds. Food was good, staff was nice, there was some decent birding in the area, but it was not the solution. So we had a nice breakfast. We, I think, fell asleep by 7 p.m. the night before, got about 8 or 9 hours of sleep, and we were up and ready to go day 2. Day 2 we did without a guide. You can see this is kind of what the feeding station should have looked like. That's a palm tanager. So day 2, we're birding on our own, and our main goal is to find some target birds that we know won't be in the main places we're going with our guides the next 2 days. And we kind of want to knock out some of the birds that we don't want to waste time with the guides. So we want to see stuff that we can ID ourselves, that might be in unique locations. And one bird we were really excited about was the sunbittern. And it's a cute little heron. And when it displays its wings, it's got these beautiful colors. And they are found along these small streams, small rushing streams. And we spent lots of hours looking for this sunbittern. And I'm sorry to say we didn't see it. But that was what brought us to this El Tesoro, because it had been reported here that week. El Tesoro is just a really interesting little park. You can see they've got their own gardens, their own paths. It had only been open for 5 months. It was an U.S. expat that had inherited this land from somebody and heard that you could make money by putting some trails in and charging a fee. So this guy did it. We didn't know where the property began. We had kind of parked along the road and we're just walking around, and he came and found us, and we were happy to pay the fee, and ended up spending multiple hours here. The birds really love the flowers. There was some open space and lots of fruiting stuff. So we spent a lot of time in this garden, probably 2 hours, picking through different species of birds. Once we got into the really dense stuff, we actually didn't see much for birds at this particular location. But it was gorgeous and a lot of fun to walk along this trail. This is a buddy of mine. Here's a couple examples of the birds on the flowers. Hoffman's woodpecker is kind of one of the more popular woodpeckers down there. We saw lots and heard even more. It was cool to see it feeding on that giant flower. In preparation for the trip, we expected to see about 20 species of hummingbirds. And And when they're the females, they're a little bit trickier to ID because they kind of have the green and white, and you just got to figure out where the white is, bill shape, proportion of tail length, all sorts of things. But this is a Canavit's hummingbird, and I was just glad to get a shot of them because they don't sit still very long. And then just another kind of example of the diversity. We did get to see a gray hawk, which was cool. Raptor there. This is a cute little slaty ant wren, which you can't really make out, but just this dark bird with a smudged face and a couple little white spots. When we get to the next couple days, I'll tell you that a lot of the species of birds have ant in the name. And they have ant wrens, they have ant thrushes, they have ant vireos. And it's because a lot of birds down there live on ants. And in our preparation and research for this trip, we were told to look for army ant swarms. And if you don't know about army ants, they'll travel by the millions and just devastate things. But there are some species of birds that will follow these army ant swarms their entire lives. They'll never leave an ant swarm because that's their entire nutrient source. So we got to see a couple ant birds. Beautiful sparrow. You can even excuse me, see its little eyelashes there. But beautiful white-eared ground sparrow. Anybody seen American redstarts? Yeah, we get a lot of American redstarts fly through here, and they even nest in our area. They have a couple different species of redstart, so it was fun to get to see this slate-throated redstart. But just kind of an example of some of the diversity. Here's another photo of that motmot I showed you earlier. It was raining, so I was really thrilled that this photo turned out at all. But you can see on the tail here, it just kind of stops abruptly, and then there's just a little bit more at the very end. I can't tell you why, but it's really cool. All the motmots do that. So they just have that thin little barb, and then the feather starts again at the end. This was really cool. So we were watching this motmot in the rain, and all of a sudden, it flies from its perch and lands on the path right in front of us, and I was thrilled. I swing my camera over, and in under 5 seconds, all this happens. Falcon comes from out of the forest, comes out. I mean, the falcon's not much bigger than this bird. Takes it out, and in under 5 seconds, flies back into the forest with this thing. And one part was really sad. It's like, this is a gorgeous bird.
This is a lot swifter than that bird alive.
And on the other hand, it's nature. The falcon's got to eat, right?
Yeah, that's the...
So that was our only look at a barred forest falcon, and it was bing, bing. So that was pretty cool. The next part of day 2, we went to the hummingbird gallery because we wanted to pick through some of these hummingbirds. So you go up these stairs. They've got a little kind of coffee shop, and there are these feeders all over. And people just piled in, standing around looking at these hummingbirds. There were probably 50 people while we were there, coming and going, of course. And we figured we were the only ones that knew any of the species of birds in that group. Nobody had a clue, but it was fun. So we ended up with some people that would follow us around and listen in as we were figuring out what stuff was. And
Don't the hummingbirds shy away from people, or they just...
oh, they got feeders. I mean, just like here, they don't mind if, especially like northern Minnesota, if you've got feeding stations, you can walk in and 10 hummingbirds will just hang out with you. This is a lesser violet ear. I've got a better picture of one right here for you. So I mentioned my buddy who takes good photos. He sent this one to me on my camera. This is the only one I have from him so far, and he hasn't even processed it. But you can see these really beautiful purple little violet tufts that come out. They flare out to attract mates, but just gorgeous. This was one of the species we saw most. And in fact, in the rainforest in this particular area, we could hear them all over the place. Very vocal bird. One of the other really popular hummingbirds we saw was this rufous-tailed hummingbird. You can see the red patch on the rump there. But just a gorgeous. We saw striped-tailed hummingbirds, and they've got a rufous patch on the side, and then if you can make it out here, it's a little bit white underneath here. But isn't it just amazing? It almost looks like scaling those feathers on the front. I just thought that was so fun.
Some of these migrate north.
Most of their hummingbirds are pretty localized. They stay in Costa Rica. It was really interesting. So we basically only get one species of hummingbird here in Minnesota, the ruby-throated. And it's not very common down there. It migrates through, but they rarely see them. And the first hummingbird we saw the whole trip was a ruby-throated female. And the guide was really impressed. He said, "How did you know what that was?" I was like, "Well, we see them all the time." But for them, it's kind of a trickier ID because they rarely get to see them. And so he was really excited about it. Magenta-throated wood stars. This is a female purple-throated magenta, which looks totally different than the male. There's that striped-tailed again. You can see the rufous on the sides. But just great diversity of hummingbirds. We had a lot of fun. We spent probably an hour and a half here. This green-crowned brilliant was the most common hummingbird that was there. And you can see really green with just a little bit of blue, but sometimes in the right light would just show beautiful purple all over. Hummingbirds are fascinating that way. Lighting changes everything. And then this is massive. This is a violet saber wing. These things are probably like this, and for a hummingbird, just massive. Anytime this came in, all the other hummingbirds took off. I had a hard time getting a photo of it, but beautiful purple, big down-curved bill, and they had some white underneath. Just a really, really neat hummingbird. That's day 2. We did some more birding, but that's a lot of the birds we saw again at these next places. So day 3 is with Esteban, and he was our most expensive guide. Just so you know, the first day cost us about $250, 3 of us to bird with the guy day 1, and that was, I don't know, we were with him 7 hours or so. Esteban cost $400, and for the 3 of us, and that was from, I think we met him at 5, and we birded with him until almost 5, so we were with him for about 12 hours. And he's in his late 30s, and not only is he a fantastic birder, but just an excellent storyteller, really great to be with. I mean, a guy you want to go grab a beer with afterwards, and just a real treat. So he's world-renowned, really, and for good reason. He's just the most excellent birding guide I've ever been with. So he took us to Curry Concha Reserve, which was on the priority list for us because when you get into the rainforest, which we were mostly in and out of the Children's Eternal Rainforest, which is known for its humidity and constant regular rain. But this Curry Concha Reserve is one of the more diverse locations we went to, meaning diverse habitats. They had gardens, open pasture land, deep primary forest, and secondary forest as well. And so this was a really great place with all sorts of great trails. You can see this is a tree that was down, and it stood taller than me. I couldn't reach the top of. So that was a 8-foot, 9-foot wide tree. All right, we'll go a little more quickly through some stuff here. I'll just spend time on the stories and quick looks. So more sparrows, more flycatchers, and then they have these thrushes, or this is a solitaire. A lot of them dark with red legs. There were probably 4 or 5 different species of thrush that were dark birds with red legs. And so that was really cool to get to see those. This is our second toucan of the trip. This is an emerald toucanet. And you maybe notice this is a giant bug it has in its bill. This is through some really thick growths, and the fact that it was the same color as the leaves made the picture all the harder. So I was glad to get this, but just a beautiful, another little kind of small toucanet. These are their turkey equivalents. They have black and crested guans. This was a really common bird that we saw all over. And this black guan was a target bird of ours, and we ended up seeing one. Again, the guide was incredible. He spotted this thing 300 yards away in the top of a tree, somewhere I would have never even looked. So we're excited to see these. They don't fly much, but spend a lot of time in the trees eating fruit. After Curry Concha, we went to, our guide gave us two options. He said we can either go to the place we all want to go, or we can go to the other place that we don't want to go, which is expensive, but it's the only place we have a chance to see a resplendent quetzal. And by the time he had birded with us for a few hours, he's like, okay, I get it. You guys are serious. You're intense. Let's go see the quetzal. We'll go see it. We'll get it in under 10 minutes. We'll hike in real fast. You're willing to pay the fee, right? Yep. Okay, good. We'll go do that. And then we'll go to the spot we really want to go. So we show up to this Monte Verde Reserve, which is really popular. Lots of people go there. And they only allow a certain number of people in at a time. And it was backed up. There was probably 40 people in front of us. And so I said, let's not bother. Let's go. He said, do you have cash? I was like, of course I've got cash. He's like, give me the cash. I give him the cash. He said, go wait over there. Sit down. Don't attract attention. Great. I mean, we're friends at this point, right? So it's all in good fun. So we go sit down, and 3 minutes later he comes, gives us our passes. He's like, let's go. And he's like, I've got good news for you. The quetzal's even closer than I thought it was. So we jump in, walk in, and within 3 minutes, just get these stunning views of this resplendent quetzal, which is a real famous bird down in Costa Rica for a good reason. I wish I could say this is my photo. This is one of the very few photos that isn't mine, because we just didn't have a lot of time, and it was up high. But had some beautiful views of a male resplendent quetzal, and then we left. And on the way out, we passed these cones, which we had seen the day before, and he said, you want to see something else cool? He takes his flashlight, flashes it in this hole, and that is a orange-kneed tarantula. And, you know, that thing is this big. They block it because I guess people were putting their hands and stuff in the hole. And dumb tourists, is right. We met lots of them. And I think we were even them ourselves. And then this was the next place we went to, which was the Santa Elena Reserve. And this was really the most rainforesty of all the places we went. You could barely see 10 yards into the forest at certain locations because it was just so dense. Moss everywhere, vines and trees on top of vines and trees, and just incredible. Pretty steep bank. You can see this is straight up and down here. Just stunning. We ended up getting up to the top of the mountain, and they had this Hawkwatch Tower, which we climbed another 40 feet up and spent some time watching, looking for certain things. This wasn't a very productive hawk watch. Sometimes you sit and you get to see lots of raptors in the middle of the day. We didn't here, but we did get to hear some odds and ends. But the next day, we had a really awesome hawk watch, which I'm excited to tell you about. Just a quick look at diversity. Another dark bird with red legs, but totally different. Another redstart. This has got the collar, so collared redstart. And these pronged barbets were really cool. I was excited to see those. So like I said, we're crazy. We meet with this guy at 5, and the next guide wants to start birding with us at 5:30 that night. So we join up with this guy at 5:30. No, it was 6:30. We did have time for dinner. So we grabbed dinner, and then we met up with Diego, who was our cheapest guide. And I connected with Diego. He's this up-and-coming birder in Costa Rica, 20 years old, and just brilliant. Needs to really work on his social skills in a lovely way. We had a great time. If you're watching this, Diego, no. Diego is a really fun guy, but just doesn't know how to interact and tell stories like some of our other guides. But $200, he took us owling one night and then birded with us the whole next day. So you can see half the cost, and but just a really excellent birder. So this is owling with Diego. He's got a lot of great connections. We were hoping to see 2 or 3 species of owl with him, and he had a spot for 6 or 7 different species. We pull up to this first spot, and immediately I've just opened the door, and I said, "We've got a mottled owl." And he said, "I don't have a spot for a mottled owl." So we were like, this is going to be an awesome night. I'm 2 seconds out the door, and I'm hearing a mottled owl. And so he was thrilled too. He's like, "Oh, I didn't think we'd get that one." And instead, he was playing for this bare-shanked screech owl. And so we were on this one stretch of road, and we ended up with 5 bare-shanked screech owls and 2 mottled owls. And this is like our first 30 minutes of owling with this guy. We're like, okay, this is going to be pretty cool. Again, just quick flash. They flew right into his call, and so we got to see him. And then we birded for 3 more hours with him and didn't see any more owls. He drove us all over. I told him we had about 2 hours, and I was like, where are we going? This is... Anyway, we had a good time. Fun young guy. Next morning, we met him after dropping him off at his place and getting back to where we're staying at about 11:30. We had to sleep until about 3:30 because we were meeting him at 4 a.m. Because we were going to San Gerardo Biological Station. And this is not for the faint-hearted. This is hiking multiple miles down a mountain. Basically, well, I'll show you pictures before I describe more. But he wants us to hike down the mountain in the dark so we get to the good habitat for sunrise. Well, we're hiking down the mountain. We're about 30 minutes in, and he hears this weird noise. So he does a quick flash with his light. He's like, "I think this is pretty cool. I've never heard these before." And he hears them again. And he goes, "That's not right." So he flashes again, and he says, "You guys are effing lucky." He said, "This is one of the top desired birds in the country. It's a vulnerable species. It's been over 2 years since I've seen one, and I'm out here every day." So we got to see a family of about 15 red lord parakeets, which have been captured and traded forever. And so it's a very vulnerable protected species. And so we got a quick look at these. This was the rarest bird of our whole trip by a long shot. Just really, really cool. And it was about at this moment when whenever we stop, men, you might be able to relate. I usually do phone, keys, wall, wallet. I feel down, and now there's a hole in the back of my pocket. And my wallet is gone. And I had just paid for something a couple hours before, so I knew I'd had it. And my brain works pretty quick. I'm going, not always, but in this moment it did. And I thought, okay, I felt something hit the back of my calf about 20 minutes ago. I assumed it was a stick because I looked down and I didn't see anything. It was dark, which is why I didn't see anything. But I didn't think anything of it. I figured that must have been where my wallet. So I took off my backpack, grabbed my flashlight. I said, "I'll meet you guys back down here. I got to go get my wallet." So I run up the mountain in the dark. I've got my flashlight. I get to where I remembered feeling it, and I thought, okay, I'm going to give myself about 5 minutes because this seems like finding a needle in a haystack. 3 minutes later, I end up finding my wallet. Grab it, hike back down. The guys are thrilled because they're getting audio recording of these birds. They're getting better photos, and there aren't any audio recordings of these particular wild birds. So they were thrilled. And I catch up to them just as the sun is rising and about 50 more meters down the trail. and we get a sunrise view of Arenal volcano. So after finding your wallet and then seeing this view, all of a sudden things are looking up. So we are in Monteverde, which is, where I'm standing, Children's Eternal Rainforest, and this is Arenal, which is only about 5 miles as the crow flies. And we end up hiking down here. So we're only about 2 or 3 miles from the volcano. And this is where we're going to spend our last night. And it's going to be a 4-hour drive for us to get there. So it would have been quicker for us to just keep walking. But obviously that wasn't an option. So that just gives you some context. And this is where the Continental Divide is. And you've got the Pacific side and the Caribbean side. And other way around, Pacific and Caribbean. And totally different species on either side. And just very different habitat for whatever reason. So by getting down into this valley, we were kind of coming where these species intersect. And so we had a really good shot at a lot of birds. We ended up seeing over 100 species of birds just on this day, on this hike down here. Again, not a lot of photos, but I'll give you just a sampling. That was a cool green hermit hummingbird. I was thrilled with that little silhouette shot, and just kind of cool. And an azure hooded jay, stunning. And they didn't sit still very well, so I didn't get any good shots. But everybody wants to know what we saw that wasn't birds, and we didn't spend much time. The guides really didn't care about monkeys at all. They were bird guys. They were not monkey guys, they were bird guides. So any shots I got of monkeys were quick while we were on the move. But we saw spider monkeys, white-faced capuchin, howler monkeys, some snakes, not a lot. This was just like garter snake-sized.
Garden variety,
Yeah. And then this was our big hawk watch. And this was almost a highlight of the trip. We're exhausted. My one buddy's in way worse shape even than I am. And so he's kind of getting grumpy. So we sit in this spot where we can look out and see Arenal volcano. We can see big portions of the sky. And we end up seeing so many different species of raptor. I can't wait for my buddy's photos because he can take flight shots with his camera while mine doesn't track very well. This is an ornate hawk eagle. We saw ornate hawk eagles. We saw black hawk eagles. We saw white hawks. We saw different kite species. It was just incredible. We sat here for about 2 hours, saw 10 species of raptor, and all sorts of other birds too. That was all the photos I put here. But we saw different warbler species, different tanager species, wrens of all sorts of varieties. It was just an amazing spot to hang out. So that was all the photos I had from that day because we were mostly hiking and traveling. And I'll try to wrap up the last 2 days here quickly. Day 5 was traveling from where we were staying in Monteverde all the way to Arenal volcano. On the drive out, we saw these 2 stunning toucans. This is a keel-billed toucan. Just look at how beautiful that big giant bill is. And this is a collared aracari, so this is different than that first one I showed you. You can see the bill color is different, and the placement of the color on the chest is different as well, but just stunning. I was thrilled with those 2 photos because we, again, saw them and then they were gone. Traveling, my one buddy really wanted to see a bare-throated tiger heron, kind of similar to our great blue heron, but you can see different coloring. They get the really broad, beautiful streaking. I saw this thing fly a mile off, and my buddies are like, "You didn't see one?" I was like, "Yeah, I did." And I whip off, and there it was just down in the ditch. And so the guys were really excited. I've seen these ones before. On our way to the last location, we stop at Las Helaciones Lodge, which has hanging bridges across the valleys.
Oh, no.
It was yeah, it was scary. I mean, the thing is shaking, and I'm not a fan of heights, so no, it wasn't my favorite. We got across one of them, and then the next couple, you had the option to do the hanging or just the stationary. I picked the stationary. They have a whole valley down there. It's called Tapir Valley. And if you don't know what a tapir is, it's a giant pig. They get to about 700 pounds. And apparently they're only nocturnal, so you never see them during the day, right? Well, we did. My camera had died, but I took this with just my phone. It was me to that door. We heard it 10 minutes before we saw it. Imagine that thing doesn't travel through the forest very quietly. But it came with its baby, and so we gave it plenty of space. But it was not interested in us at all. We had heard at this location that there was roosting owls, and so I talked to one of the naturalists on site. Most naturalists, just so you're aware, in Costa Rica don't know much about birds. They're interested in the monkeys and the other kinds of wildlife, but they actually don't know much about birds. And they don't speak very good English either. So I'm communicating with this guy that I wanted to see a pájaro de noche, which is the closest I could get to owl, a night bird. He's kind of looking at me weird and doesn't know what I'm talking about. But it says, you'll see something blue. I know blue, azul, okay? 10 minutos, azul. Okay, got it. So we're on this wild goose chase. Me and my buddy, we're walking. We get about 4 miles up the hill, and there's this really thin little hose, and it's blue. I said, this has got to be it. I look up, 2 owls right there. And we got to see these stunning crested owls. Really thick woods again, so to get any sort of photo without disturbing them was a challenge. And I'm not the best birder in the world, but I can spot things pretty quickly, if you haven't caught on to that. So we're on this trail, and people walk by us, and it takes me several minutes to get them on these birds, but I look up and I spot them right away. But so they blend in pretty good. Lots of brush and stuff in front of them, but they've got these stunning crests. Just a really cool owl. So that was a highlight from this day. We also saw yellow-throated toucan. You can notice it doesn't have that colorful bill like the other one. Otherwise looks very similar. And a yellow-throated euphonia. We saw lots of different species of euphonia and just beautiful little birds. And we get to where we're staying for the last night. And we've got this stunning view of the volcano and the lake right from where we're staying. Me and my buddy that evening sat down here and watched birds. And I won't get into the details, but buddy number 3 comes down, and he's madder than hell. And he's laying into us, and I still to this day don't know what he was mad about. Whatever. Traveling, 3 guys, you never know. That night, the last bird we saw that night was a rufous mottmet, which was another one that I didn't expect to see at all. But you can see again that tail where it stops. And this is pretty dark. So I was pretty excited to get a photo of it at all. But just a stunning rusty color there. Then the last day, we went to Arenal Observatory Lodge, which has the highest diversity of species reported in any site in Costa Rica. And they do have these beautiful feeding stations. You can see all this rebar, and they have fruit littered throughout. So we were pretty exhausted. You could see we were fighting the night before. So sitting down, watching birds, nobody talking to each other was the right way to the end of this trip. Lots of species of tanagers. We had golden-hooded, scarlet-rumped, silver-throated, and emerald tanagers all here. This is a palm tanager, which you can't really see. We also had blue-gray tanagers, summer tanagers, which we get here in the U.S. But just stunning birds. Also saw more variety. black-cheeked woodpecker. This is a broad-billed mottmet. That's the smallest of the mottmets. It's only about this big compared to the others that are like this. But big bill. Thick-billed finch, seed finch maybe? Oh, yep, I did put it there. That was kind of a cool bird. This one was one of my favorites of the whole trip. It's a red-legged honeycreeper. There's brilliant legs and a goofy bill, brilliant blue. I was really excited about this one. More turkey-like birds. Gray-headed chakalala, which we saw a lot of, and then great curassow, which was a first of the trip we got to see here. So that was pretty exciting. And they actually have two different color morphs. This is the more common, but on this site they have them and they're brown and white. So that was kind of fun. And they came right to the feeders. And these are big birds. So they'd fly up and all the other little ones would take off. At one point on the feeders, I think we saw 12 of these giant birds. A couple better shots of ones I showed you from before. Rufous-tailed hummingbird again and yellow-throated toucan, but just a couple better looks. We saw about 15 of these at this location. And a photo of the volcano to wrap it up. It's an active volcano. Apparently, since it's rainforest, it's usually cloudy and you can't see the top of it. So we were pretty lucky, and you could actually see it smoking there. Last time it had lava come down was 40 or 50 years ago, but you can still see the trails. And for those that don't know about volcanoes, it's just really nutrient rich. So anytime they put ash anywhere, it's like a natural fertilizer, better than anything we can come up with, which is why it's always so lush right around volcanoes. So that's a quick look at a trip with lots of species of birds. A lot of fun. Anybody have any questions?
Still friends?
Oh, I haven't heard back from him. I left him a voicemail.
He's holding out in the pictures.
Yeah. No, yeah, we're still friends.
Thank you.
One of them I won't travel with again, and the other one I will.
All traveling companions start to stink after 3 days.
Yeah, well, I think we started stinking long before that.
There appears to be a lot of fencing.
Yeah, there isn't that much. Just happened to be, that's where the edgeland is. And so a lot of my photos are from there. But no, there isn't a lot of fencing.
They're not fencing anything in or out other than you.
So this is actually telephone wires in this particular photo. Some of the other fencing was near where we were staying, and they actually had cattle.
Okay, I see some barbed wire,
So the barbed wire and the fencing was all just cattle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were the bugs bad? Did you have to worry about malaria?
Yeah.
and all that?
So first 5 days of the trip, I didn't have hardly any problems. When we were on the coastal side, we had some bugs, but it wasn't bad. And then the last day at this site, I got destroyed. I was wearing, most days I wore long pants and long shirt, and this day I was wearing shorts because it was hot, and my legs are still scarred up from all the bug bites I got. So depends on the location.
Only one tarantula?
Only one tarantula.
Are most of the birds that you saw non-migratory, or do they migrate?
Most of them are non-migratory in Costa Rica, but we saw quite a few species that we're familiar with here that were migrating through Costa Rica. And for the guides, it's really fun when they bird with guys like us because we know the warblers really well. They call them confusing warblers, and I've even had a text from that Esteban I was telling you about since I left, and he said, "Can you tell me which one this is?" So yeah, we know the warblers pretty well because we see them every year.
You saw a lot of species in a short time.
A lot of species in a short time. Yep. My goal was 200 species new to me and 250 in total. So we did really well to get to 300 and 225 new to me. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for listening. captive audience.